Hello again, I am Blunty, and that's Wild Hearts S on the Nintendo Switch 2. It's been out for a few days now, and just gone through its first weekend of liveness. I've been playing it a lot over the last few days too, and I've now burned through enough of the game to get to the parts I was most worried about. And I was right to be worried, because I just found out where this game starts to break, and it is just exactly where I thought it would be. See, in this game's first life, 2.5 years ago on PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, one of the things that doomed the otherwise very promising game, aside from the catastrophic mistake to partner with EA as their publisher, a mistake they did not repeat with the Switch 2 version, thankfully, was some extremely crappy optimization and massive performance issues across all platforms, but none more severe than PC, where they didn't even get PC threading right. The game was just sitting on one CPU core at launch, which was hampering performance a little bit. It was a ridiculous disaster. And while some of the performance issues were evident right from the start of the game, the biggest issues didn't rear their heads until a few chapters into the story progression where, no spoilers, but events unfold, such as there's some significant changes to the weather across all of the maps. And as the monster fights inevitably get ever more challenging and ever more hectic and ever more effects laden, it opened the wound that were the performance issues very wide indeed. And no map was more notorious for taking a big, sloppy coil on the frame rates than the winter-themed Fort Fuyofusagi. I think I pronounced that right. Probably not. And while your first visit here in the game was, well, it smacked performance around a bit originally, it was kinda off, but tolerable. By the time the weather event happens and certain new variants of monsters appear, things, well, they got unplayable for many. So, understandably, I was mildly concerned about getting to that point on the Switch 2 version. Although all my earlier testing, as detailed in a previous video, seemed promising. It was always at the back of my mind, this moment. But as you've been seeing, the map itself performs much like the rest of the game. Yay! However, and you knew there was a however coming, didn't you? The big test was the fight at the fort itself, where you once again come face to face with the big, frosty, cranky puppy you first meet in the opening cinematics and tutorial section. And yeah, it's still the worst part of the game when it comes to performance. However, while the generally game-wide target of 45 FPS is, frankly, nowhere to be seen here, it still does very nearly almost maintain above 30 FPS at all times, with extremely infrequent dips scraping along at 29 or 28 FPS for just a few frames at a time. 30 FPS is, of course, bare minimum acceptable performance, especially for the kind of combat this game offers, but it is still playable. And at the very least, it's comparatively stable and reliable, certainly compared to the stuttery, jittery, inconsistent mess it was in its previous life back in 2023. There is another combat test I did, even deeper into the game, in a much more lush environment against a monster with even more effects and whatnot in its attacks, but I will save that for the end of the video, as the monster there could be considered a spoiler for those who would rather be surprised by the monster reveals. I'll give you a warning before we get there, okay? But I also ran some environmental runs across every map under the weather changes too, and I'm happy to be able to report that the environmental changes, including the rain and in some cases sleet and snow, had no significant impact on the general performance that these maps offered up in their original forms earlier in the story. Again, this is unlike what happened to the original version of the game back in the day. Same goes for a few fights I tested, and in general the many hunts I've done over the weekend while grinding out my own gear and progressing the story and whatnot. As I had hoped, they got it largely nailed down this time, definitely not wanting a repeat of the performance complaints they had the first time around that helped sink the game. I had one instance of a pretty severe frame drop for like half a second, and it was quite jarring indeed, but I have never seen it replicated since, so I'm not too concerned by it. Seems more like a freak occurrence rather than an endemic issue. So, while these environmental run-throughs play out, how are you all finding the game? I do hope you are enjoying it as much as I am. I've got no idea how well the game's launch and second chance at life is actually going. I don't think Koei Tecmo have said anything yet, and there's not a huge amount of chatter online about it on the hashtags and whatnot. But to say the least, my attempts to stream it over on Twitch across the weekend fell to a frankly pathetically tiny audience. There's not a lot of interest in watching someone else play this game, apparently. In fact, as I checked throughout the weekend, there was never more than 4 streamers total broadcasting this particular game, and never more than a few dozen viewers shared between them all. Which doesn't bode well, frankly. I still think it's a very fun game, well worth investing the time in if you're a fan of the monster hunting genre, a genre which, in my opinion, has far too little competent competition for Capcom's giant, to keep them honest. But it seems like it's not really taking off in a very big, or at least very visible way, which I feel like is a shame. I really wanted this game to, land with a big splash and be a big hit and get a second chance at life, and then we'd see sequels and whatnot, but who knows at this point. I will say this, though. I see a lot more Japanese names in multiplayer than I do English, so it seems at least it might be doing quite well over there. But also, my time zone here in Sydney is only a couple hours off from Tokyo, so it might just be there's more Japanese and Aussies on at the same time than there is Aussies and, say, Europeans and North Americans, just because of the time zone stuff. I've certainly seen a similar phenomenon with the Japanese character usernames I see most often in Monster Hunter before, especially on Rise and Sunbreak, which also happen to share a Nintendo Portable as their home. I wonder if that's a coincidence. Multiplayer does seem healthy enough though. Matching into hunts has been fast and consistent every time I've done it, though it has been mildly annoying getting people to match into my own hunts deeper into the game, mainly because I've had a couple of days head start with a reviewer's code, so naturally not a lot of regular players had caught up to my progress yet, but all that seems to have started to even out over the weekend though. In any case, in a moment I'll have that footage that a few of you might consider spoilery. There's no story spoiler in any of it, you'll just be seeing a monster that ties into a story point, so not a big deal really, but just so you know, now is the time to turn away if you're actually concerned by that. No whining at Blunty, okay? You got your warning, you're gonna see a monster you didn't see earlier in the game, and you're gonna see his attacks and stuff, alright? Right. So, yeah, one of my favorite monster designs, actually, a big flaming peacock, which, you can write your own puns and humanized fan art for this drag queen of a critter, can't you? It's a hell of a fight, though. And with all the flames and the feathers, and on one of the lusher maps, it too was a performance worry. But as you can see, while the frame rates are a little lower than average, in general, we're still hitting around 40 FPS, which was a bit surprising, frankly, but very welcome. And again, nice and consistent. So, I'll let the rest of this roll out, and hopefully you found this interesting and or useful. I am Blunty. Thank you to the patrons. Thank you for your attention, and I will catch you next time.
It's livid! 有行人。
Down you go. Broke it.
Damage done!